What could be the reason that even after being the world's largest oil producer, America cannot freely use its own oil if it wants? It's somewhat like a farmer who produces crops on his own land, yet when he goes to use those crops, he has to fold his hands in front of someone else. The world we live in, what we see on the surface and the reality behind it are always different. Similarly, every year, millions of containers travel from China to America. But why does America end up dumping many of them into piles of waste? And in the middle of all this, how does Iran manage to smuggle Boeing 777 aircraft right in front of the whole world? So in today's episode, let's explore all of this.
Across the world's oceans, millions of ships are constantly moving, carrying about 90% of our global economy on their shoulders.
At any given moment, thousands of container ships are crossing vast seas, each loaded with thousands of metal boxes.
The clothes you wear, the phone in your hand. At some point, they were inside one of these boxes.
From a distance, it seems simple.
Containers arrive with goods and return empty, everything perfectly planned. But in reality, there's a hidden imbalance in this flow that will surprise you.
China has, over the past few decades, become the factory of the world.
Its massive exports and relatively limited imports have created a huge trade empire.
When these piles of containers reach ports in Europe or America,
That's where the real problem begins.
compared to China, Europe's combined business profits are quite small. And in America, the situation is even more different. As the world's largest consumer, the country imports a lot, but exports relatively little.
As a result, only about 40% of containers returning to China are filled with goods.
So where do the remaining 60%
It's not that
go?
all of them return empty, because shipping empty containers is expensive. Sending a single empty container back to China costs around $3,000 and takes up valuable space on a ship. That same space could generate hundreds of thousands of dollars if filled with goods.
Moreover, China can manufacture a new container for about $2,000.
So there's little incentive to return old ones. As a result, every year, more new containers are produced, while old ones pile up in ports and surrounding areas, rusting away.
Some people buy them to build cheap warehouses or small homes. Others melt them down for steel.
But a large portion remains unused, silent monuments to the imbalance of global trade.
On the other side of this global system lies the mystery of America's oil. The country produces more oil than anyone else in the world, yet it cannot fully use its own supply.
The first reason is the type of oil.
The oil extracted in America is light and thin, known as light crude. But most of its refineries are designed to process heavy, thick crude oil. In the past, America imported heavy oil from countries like Mexico and Venezuela and built its infrastructure accordingly.
Now, upgrading those refineries to process light crude would require over $200 billion in investment, which cannot be done quickly. So instead, the U.S. exports its light oil at higher prices and imports heavier oil at lower prices.
The second reason is infrastructure limitations.
There aren't enough pipelines to transport oil from where it's extracted to where it's refined. For example, even though Texas has vast oil reserves, there aren't sufficient pipelines to carry that oil to refineries on the East Coast.
Similarly, states like California lack proper pipeline infrastructure, causing them to rely on imports for about 70% of their fuel.
So even though oil exists within the country, it cannot always reach the right places.
Now, if we look at sanctions and global politics, we see another dramatic story. Iran has been under strict U.S. sanctions for years, meaning it cannot legally buy or sell goods with America or its allies.
Yet Iran's private airline, Mahan Air, operates several American Boeing and European Airbus aircraft. How is that possible?
The story unfolds like a thriller movie. Around 2024 to 25,
5 Boeing 777 aircraft suddenly appeared in Iran. Originally, these planes belonged to Singapore Airlines and had been sitting abandoned in the Australian desert for years.
Iran couldn't purchase them directly due to sanctions.
So first, a US-based company bought them. Then, on paper, they were sold to 2 fake companies registered in Madagascar and Cambodia, companies that didn't actually exist, created only to bypass sanctions.
Once the aircraft were registered under Madagascar,
they moved beyond US jurisdiction. Then, under the pretext of maintenance, the planes filed flight plans toward Kenya. But once they entered Afghan airspace,
They turned off their transponders and disappeared
After
from
that, they
radar.
changed course and landed in Iran. By the time the world realized what had happened, the planes had already become part of Mahan Air's fleet.
Legally, the United States could do nothing because Iran's name appeared nowhere in the paperwork. Everything had been done through third parties.
All of this reminds us how uncertain the global economy really is. Decisions made far away can impact our daily lives. So the next time you hear about rising oil prices or shortages of goods, remember, behind that reality lies a complex story of ships, laws, and geopolitics.